I'm Allie Zendrian, editor-in-chief of Brand News, and this is the Financial Services News You Might Have Missed podcast. This is where I uncover news gems that might not have gotten their full chance to sparkle, and I try to dust them off a little bit. I do that with my trusted co-host and personal financial advisor, Brandon Galisi of Galisi Financial. Brandon, thanks as always for doing this. How's your week been?
Yeah, thanks, Allie. Always happy to be here. We always chat about fun stuff. A lot of times, especially the last several weeks, some fancy feelings have been making their way into the podcast on both sides, both you and me, which I think, at least if nothing else, selfishly, I think we're having fun. So hopefully those that tune in enjoy it as well. It's been a good week overall. Nothing crazy to report, but also nothing bad to report either. So it's been a good week. What about you? Any good highlights?
It's been a busy week, but steady busy, so I will take it. But looking forward to next week has some promising things coming for me. Fingers crossed.
Nice. Okay, maybe report back next week or the next couple weeks if possible.
Well, actually, so one of those pieces of news will be in next week.
Nice. I'll tease it for next week. Nice.
But anyway, so speaking of fancy feelings, and thank you for teaching me about that phrase that I didn't know about until, 3 weeks ago? So we're going to start this week with fancy feelings. So I saw a story in Financial Planning about the CFP Board launching a new initiative. They're highlighting basically any of the bad actors or any of the instances of ill repute in the industry. So Brandon, if you want to delve into that a little bit more, I feel like as somebody with their CFP, you might have a better understanding.
So the title of the article that you found was CFP Board Tool Buries Thousands of Advisor Red Flags, which it's a pretty aggressive headline right off the top. Okay, you've definitely got my attention. You sent that to me on LinkedIn this morning. I clicked it and I'm like, that's interesting because I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but there's a decent amount of advisors that have some disclosures, but from a CFP perspective, they're perfectly clean, so to speak. Is at least the way that I interpreted the article. Even after teeing it up, I've got some feelings and thoughts on this, but even after hearing that or reading through the article as well, or feel free to add things that I missed. But what are your thoughts on this article that we're talking about here?
Well, so same thing. I saw the headline and was like, whoa. So Elijah, you did a fabulous job. Kudos to Financial Planning for that. I was thinking, so I appreciate the fact that the CFP board is bringing more awareness to who a good financial advisor is. As we were talking about just before the podcast started, yes, you could be a CFA, a CFP, a gobbledygook of language. There are like a bajillion different kinds of titles, but that arguably means something on the one hand, but it doesn't necessarily mean everything. And I think that was important to realize. I also appreciate the fact that they were bringing to light. I don't think that the general public has a lot of resources or awareness of an advisor. Advisor A is not the same as advisor B, as the same as advisor C. And so good that we are able to call out who is less than reputable.
Yeah. And I think especially the point that I wanted to touch on that I'm really passionate about too is the one that you brought up on any designation, whether that be CFP, CPA, you even said CFA, which is even more exams than the CFP. That alone is not going to make someone a good professional in their field. It alone is not going to make someone moral and ethical and always do the right thing. Now, I do very much value, we've talked a ton about the CFP board and the praise that we give them. And I'm obviously a certified financial planner professional myself. So I am a big fan of the CFP, but I also acknowledge that alone isn't the end all be all. And I think it's interesting here too, because we're seeing that someone could be quote unquote clean and no disclosures on from a CFP perspective, but might have some on FINRA or I think it was just on broker check, which would be FINRA. And that's interesting because you can go through and look at different advisors in the industry. And sometimes they might have a disclosure. And I think the article even mentioned this. Sometimes it's just a he said, she said, where the advisor could have been a fiduciary, could have acted, and at least at the time, what they believed was the client's best interest. And then something changed. Something happened. Maybe there was some level of miscommunication and the client was upset about something. You never know what could be going on in the client's life either that would cause them to maybe be extra upset about a certain thing. So it's interesting. So on one hand, it's like, I could see why the CFP board on some of those types of cases wouldn't want to negatively impact an advisor that tried to do the right thing and unfortunately ended up just working, we'll call it, with the wrong person, or someone was, if we can use the word Karen, was maybe more of a Karen and just upset for almost no reason. But then also from the consumer side, it's like, okay, well, how many is too many disclosures? If there's a bunch of different disclosures for one advisor, but they're showing up clean on the CFP board, now there's going to be this potential mismatch. So I guess I don't have the fanciest of feelings on this one. Like if you put me on either side and to say, hey, argue both of it, I feel like I could do a decent job because I could see both points. But it was interesting to see that, advisors that were said to be clean on the CFP side were actually not if you were to look at broker check.
But so then I wonder what the discrepancy is, or I guess what merits a disclosure, because you would think, so if I were to liken this to the medical profession, there are websites that you can check and everybody's treated the same, if there's sexual harassment or if there's whatever, it's all just considered the same versus, like you said, these situations where it's kind of shades of gray. So I'm curious then how we as an industry can get to that place where it's more standardized like that. But I also then want consumers to utilize that and to understand that you can do that kind of research and understand who's suitable for you and who isn't.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on the compliance side, and I'm trying to think back because this was even more relevant whenever I was at a large financial company that was also a broker dealer who was then managed by FINRA. Because right now, even if you look me up on broker check, since I don't hold my Series 7 anymore, I'm up there. By the way, I do not have any disclosures. I knew that's for sure what you were doing. I do not. I have zero disclosures. I mean, if feel free to look it up too. But my point was being, if you look me up on broker check, because I no longer hold my Series 7, it's actually interesting. It only says I have like 3 years of experience because that's how many years I was in the BD world. So from my perspective, I mean, that's a slightly different conversation. I'm kind of like, well, that's kind of lame. I definitely have more experience than that. And I didn't get terminated. I wasn't fired. There's no disclosures on there. Now, on the broker check site, it's the same thing. If you search, it will say this was a previously registered broker. That would have been the Series 7 license that I have since. But it will give a link to the SEC IAPD. Don't ask me what that stands for. I don't know. But anyways, it'll link there. And then that's like the broker check equivalent to fee only or even fee based RIAs who don't have a broker dealer association. And there it has my appropriate years of experience, which is nice. Also, it would show disclosures there as well. Now, I don't know if, like, just say, for example, I did have a disclosure whenever I was at the broker dealer. I don't know even if that carries over to the SEC website. So I'm not 100% sure. Also, I mean, you're in the industry, so you're a bad example, but I feel like most people aren't going to look at broker check. They don't know what broker check is. They've never heard of broker check. And even there, all you can really see is if there is a disclosure or not and how many years of experience. Like, really isn't a great way to suss out if someone is good or not good, other than an arbitrary, this person has a disclosure. You can read like 2 sentences of it.
Well, then you feel like it's almost better for somebody to like Google News the person and just see like, all right, so when I type in Brandon Galisi's name, what comes up? Because then at that point, you would see how many times I feel like the industry is so obsessed with the so-and-so defrauded an old lady. So you would find that. But yeah, to your point, I am hopeful that the industry is doing this because it would be good for us to get to that place. And I feel like then the industry overall would be taken more seriously. But yeah, to your point, there needs to be more standardization and a little bit more of an understanding of what counts as what, or even for the layperson, what is a disclosure? What does that mean exactly?
Right. Because I think sometimes, again, don't quote me on this. This is thinking back, but I think even any sort of quote unquote written complaint. So like if someone were to send in a letter or even email an advisor who's at a broker dealer, my understanding is they would have to report that to their compliance, and that could end up counting as a complaint or disclosure. They at least have to report it. So like I said, and now when you get into some of those areas, I think it's probably more telling if someone is having the same issue multiple times, that's obviously that's a pretty clear type of red flag. And also from this study, it didn't specifically mention it, but it would be very, very interesting to see out of all the 100,000 plus CFPs, the few that do have some level of disclosures in general, what type of business model that they might be in. Now, I'm not on here to necessarily debate fee models. That's not the purpose of this, but I would at least speculate that those who are fee only or even mostly fee based, but maybe like for me, I'm not fee only. I have my insurance license and typically just sell term life insurance to folks who don't have it and who need it, and my full financial planning clients. But I would be willing to speculate that maybe some of those folks that have at least a higher probability of getting those disclosures, probably selling high commission products potentially, those can sometimes be an issue, or have much more clear conflicts of interest where it was, let me just put all $3 million. I actually talked to a CFP who a broker was trying to suggest that someone put out of the $3 million portfolio, I think $1 million in A-share mutual funds, which would be a fat commission up front, and then another $200,000 in variable annuity product that would have been another massive, massive commission. Like we're talking to the tune of, I think the estimate was like $300,000 to $400,000 right to the advisor.
Wow.
With to be honest, relatively minimal work to
Mhm.
basically sell those products.
Right.
So if advisors are in fee structures like that and are behaving in those types of ways, my theory would be those are the ones that are having a much higher probability of disclosure. Client doesn't know exactly what they're getting into. They then do talk to a great financial planner, which is this was the case. This was my buddy, and fortunately, he was able to catch them on the front end and was able
Okay.
to talk them out of it. So again, shout out to the CFP board because this is a great advisor. But if that hadn't have happened, she could have bought those products. If then she then talked to a great advisor after the fact, and they're like, "Did you realize that this person just sold you stuff and made like 300K?" No, they didn't tell me any of that. Boom. Now there's that disclosure on the other advisor, at least potentially.
Mm. Yeah, got it. Well, so Elijah or CFP board, if you guys would like to do a little bit more digging, I know at least Brandon and I would be interested. Hopefully, somebody else would be too. But please, we would like to look into this, and I would be curious to see how the industry takes it. But
Yeah.
we will see. The next piece of news: this is AtoZ Communications client Nitrogen, home of the famous risk number. If you don't know about it, I don't know what to say. The firm announced its AI meeting center this week. It's the built-in assistant for capturing and curating meeting notes within Nitrogen's platform. That's among the key differentiators for this note taker in particular, is that Nitrogen is already compliance approved by so many firms that it's just a seamless addition to advisors' workflows. Nitrogen was really made for client meetings because so many of its tools are already being used in that fashion. Another thing to keep in mind is that Nitrogen's AI meeting center is making CRMs what advisors have longed for that piece of technology to be, which I think is that part especially is particularly striking because I recall whether it was the last two or maybe a little bit before that, but the two times that I've seen F2 strategy report on CRM, it's been abysmal. Nobody really likes it, lots of complaints about it. So being able to see that important piece of technology used the way that it ought to be is important. But Brandon, I talked a lot. Any and all thoughts on that?
I think this is a great use case of AI where it's integrating with the CRM. It's taking some meeting notes as well. Like right now, I think that's in my humble opinion, probably the lowest hanging fruit for
Yeah.
advisors and a lot of other professions, but advisors specifically, because I mean, I remember before I, even had that legitimate yellow pad, and sometimes even on a virtual meeting, believe it or not, I don't know why I felt like I couldn't type the
Mm.
same for whatever reason. I could feel like I could more discreetly write things, even though I don't have to be discreet when I'm just literally actively listening and taking notes. But that was a kind of a pain in the butt type of process. But now, I mean, I'm just using the built-in Zoom companion for now, but now I'm able to be even more present. Where sure, if there's like something I really, really need to write down, sure, I'll type that up just really quickly. But now I can focus more on the conversation and then review the summary after the fact. So I don't have mine near as integrated as this, which is really cool, where I could see this allowing firms to scale and have that same advisor now potentially be able to serve more clients. So I think that's really where we're going with AI. We're going to be able to have that same deep level of service across more potential households, which then also potentially opens up new business models to serve the underserved markets that previously weren't profitable, but now with all these automations and these AI tools can now become profitable because it simply takes you less time to serve a client. And therefore you could charge less and still get paid the same on an hourly basis, if you will, whatever that target might be, and serve more people and also do so profitably.
I'm not going to lie, it didn't occur to me at all, the going down market aspect of this, but that does totally make sense. And I mean, I'm a huge proponent. As you know, I am an Elements user, and obviously you are my financial advisor, so you are too. So yes, that is huge, and that's created a great opportunity for the not ultra wealthy to get financial services. So I think in addition to them being able to go down market, I think it'll give advisors more of a chance to get those opportunities. So for instance, if I just drop in a meeting, oh, I'm going to get a new dog, but it's in a sentence with 5 other things that were really important, and then like, by the way, I'm getting a new dog. Did you really pick up on that last thing? Is that something that then when I get it that you want to message me about or whatnot, but maybe you didn't hear it because I loaded the rest of the sentence with a bajillion other things. So I think, and that's a poor example as far as financial advice, but I think that this could lead to an opportunity of finding out, oh, my sister-in-law shouldn't be in the will anymore, and here's why, or whatnot.
Yeah, and I think being able to then take that really valuable data, and again, hopefully the AI would be able to catch the piece about your dog or the will example, and maybe overlay that. I know there's some tools that are out there now, and maybe they're even building these out, but then having just smart insights where maybe I get pinged 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later. I'm sure this could all be customizable at some point that says, hey, you should check in with Allie, see if she did get her new dog. And then now I feel like using data and insights like that, where you're not only talking about, we'll talk about the will example. Yes, that's important. Maybe I should follow up and make sure that that person's out of the will now, but also being able to have that same personalized touch, but with those personal items. And then have it where, because I think one important part, and I'm really passionate about this too, I hope advisors aren't trying to automate everything all at once and too quickly. Because if we're automating too many things, how do we know one what's really valuable to a client? Because certain things aren't gonna do as well. Like, say for example, I had an email template automatically went out and was asking about your new dog, where it was clearly canned. It misses the entire mark. Like, it doesn't matter. You're not gonna feel seen and heard because you weren't. Because I didn't actually send it to you. But if you could, we can use, AI again, where it sends me a to do, and maybe it comes up with a templated email, but I go in, I edit it, and then I send it. Now I didn't automate everything, but I automated the parts that AI can do, and I did not automate my human touch. So those are the things that I think are important to keep in mind, because I see some advisors are just trying to automate every single thing. I think that they could miss the mark, and then we're going to miss too much out on the human touch if that's the case.
You're right. Absolutely. I could see how that's going to happen, where you have a little bit of information, but it's basically just enough to be dangerous and it doesn't fit. So absolutely good pointing that out. Our second piece of news this week, it's an AtoZ Communications Network member, Gladstone Group, launched Gladstone Connect, which combines the firm's 20-year M&A prowess with cutting-edge technology. Gladstone Connect streamlines the matching process between firms while also making it more affordable and therefore democratizing access to high-quality M&A service for smaller RIA firms. What I thought particularly was interesting about this, apart from all of that, which is incredibly important, is that it's coming during the same week that DeVoe & Company announced that advisor firm deal making has hit an all-time high for the first 6 months of this year.
Wow.
So obviously we are doing the deals and we need to keep the machine moving, and I appreciate the fact that from Gladstone, the smaller firms being kept in mind and being able to leverage the same kind of opportunities. What did you think about this one?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing the same thing there. Even my thoughts on how I think AI and being more efficient can allow us to serve more profitable folks that typically weren't served by the financial planning industry. Same exact concept here, but applied to M&A. Before, maybe you had to be a certain size before it started to even become worth it to partner with an M&A professional. But now if they're able to democratize that service, now you've got more access, and because they're more efficient. Like before, they couldn't have charged, I think I saw like $500 or something was in there. Before, that probably would not have even touched the surface, and they would have been selling that at a huge loss, and it probably wouldn't have made sense for long. But now they sound like they've got tools and the systems and likely right automations in place that they can now serve. So again, I'm not going to be surprised if we see this shift in probably a lot of different industries where more people can be served, or a new group of people can now be served. And I mean, that's just the advancement of technology. Like even recently, I've been talking to people about just the technology of even our microphones. Like I'm right now using a Blue Yeti microphone that, I don't know the exact timing, but 10, 20, definitely long time ago, like this would have been a professional microphone that you would have had to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on. And at the time, it wouldn't have even been as good as this. And now we can get these things for like $50 to $150, and you could easily get an incredible microphone, right? So we're seeing it in a lot of different things, but I think we're starting to see it maybe more in the more services and professional services type places, because it was tougher to automate those things before. Technology keeps getting better, and the physical technology for audio, video, stuff like that. But maybe we're just finally now seeing it with how are we actually truly saving our time? And that's allowing us to charge less, serve more people, go down market, etc.
Another thing that I thought was important about Gladstone Connect, so it being able to serve more of the smaller firms, I would assume, although I'm also assuming, and I know that what that does, but those smaller firms might be those advisors who are sunsetting. So being able to offer them that opportunity and it not be, like you said, either at just such an exorbitant rate that it's almost not worth it. You would prefer to like wind down the business than to sell it, I think is a great opportunity.
Yeah. And even from their article, they're saying about 100,000 advisors are starting to think about sunsetting, which although I feel like we keep hearing that, we touched on that in the last couple of weeks already, so we won't beat that dead horse, but that's a lot of people. So, that's a huge addressable market for Gladstone here, especially if they're now able to serve a substantially larger portion of those 100,000, whereas previously they couldn't. That could be huge for their business, and even the larger RIAs that might want to buy some of those sunsetting advisor practices. So it seems like, which I think most good business is, when all the way across the board. The advisor that's going to be selling has now better access. Bigger companies maybe now are able to to potentially buy a larger pool of RIAs. And then, of course, Gladstone being there to help facilitate that. So I think it's one across the board.
Well put. Love it. So our next piece of news is from the Women in Insurance and Financial Services and Jump. The two groups partnered together to get more AI to women in finance. As you can see, the trend is AI. I didn't know that it was AI week, but apparently it is. Given that women are and will continue to play a huge role in financial decisions, especially as the great wealth transfer happens, advisors will then be better equipped to foster relationships that are built on trust as a result of this AI. So I thought that it was interesting, the focus on women, and I appreciate the shout out to them, because it does seem like a lot more of the money is transitioning toward us. And as I've noticed from Carrie Carbonaro's book, Women in Wealth. By the way, if you haven't gotten it yet, where have you been? So many advisors aren't really equipped to speak to women because we do think about finances differently than men. And so having that AI and that tech and in women's hands or downstream getting to women, I think is great.
Yeah, no,
Brandon,
I think it's great. I think one thing too that jumped out from this was the fact that someone with Jump AI was able to look at all these different client conversations on, hey, how do we effectively have these wealth transfer conversations? So that was something that I hadn't considered as much of a use of an AI tool, where now we've got all access to all of this data across a ton of different firms. So now hopefully we're able to learn faster on what actually makes these conversations, whether that's a wealth transfer conversation, talking to female clients in general. I think that can be helpful and a really cool use of data. At least historically, even I started in the industry in 2017, 2018. We've been hearing about this wealth transfer for quite some time, and I've heard awful stories of someone or a couple meeting with an advisor and they're exclusively talking to the husband.
Yeah.
And that would make me so uncomfortable. Like, even if it was the other way around, even if I was only talking to the wife, for example, like just that alone, I would be so uncomfortable not engaging both parties in this situation, let alone do so in a rude and almost intentionally disrespectful way. I don't know how anyone communicates like that or has been in business for quite some time, but yeah, so those are some of my thoughts. Overall, good things.
I did love the fancy feelings there. So I want to tack onto that a little bit, if you don't mind my asking. Because I completely hear you, and I would be with you that if there are two people sitting in front of me, if there are three people sitting in front of me, you sort of have to at least try your best to be as equal as humanly possible. But if you do have that couple where whether either party is seemingly disinterested, or how do you sort of navigate I get that this isn't your thing, but also I'm still speaking to you?
Good question. Because sometimes it is like that, where we'll just say one partner is more the money one that's managing all the money. And sometimes it's like pulling teeth to even get what's called the non-money managing spouse. And recently it's sometimes shifted. Sometimes that's, that's the husband. Sometimes that could be the wife. But in that, what I try to do is I'm leading, at least in that first, we'll call it strategy session meeting, before we just start diving straight into the numbers. I like to ask some questions. Shout out to Carl Richards for this one. We haven't shouted him out in a little while, but why is money important to you? Is one of my favorite kickoff questions that I got from him. And whenever there's two people, sometimes if I could tell who's talking more, let's just say the husband is talking more in this example, I'll actually ask the wife first. I'll be like, hey, why is money important to you? And then, hey, if you don't mind, Allie, could you go first? Making sure that just doing my best at least to facilitate that and hold the space. And what I found too is when we're having those types of discussions, because I think sometimes people think, okay, I'm going to go talk to an advisor. They're going to show me a bunch of spreadsheets and graphs, things that I don't care about, things that I don't understand. My eyes are glazing over and I'm checked out. But as advisors, when we can engage that client much earlier, because we're not just going over a bunch of the boring stuff, and most people like to talk about themselves, at least to some degree, it makes it easier for them to open up a bit more. And then now the conversation's flowing. It's a much better just three-way conversation, we'll say. And then now even when we do get to the numbers part, still making sure that both are engaged and interacting with both. And if maybe one's dominating the conversation, again, we'll just stick with the same example. Historically, if the husband is dominating the conversation, I'll intentionally then ask a question and then have the wife respond first. To make sure. So each situation is a bit different, but I know that was a very long-winded answer, but I do my best to make sure every person is equally heard. And again, I think talking about some non-finance stuff, trying to just figure out like what are they passionate about? And in that question, I can usually find something, and then a couple layers deep questions can be helpful too. And again, I genuinely listen after the fact too. And I think a lot of people aren't used to having someone ask good questions and genuinely listen to the answer, asking follow-up questions on what they're saying. And again, genuinely caring and intently listening, because you can tell when someone's faking it, like if they're just trying to sell you or build fake rapport. So I think that is helpful and maybe a bit disarming of, oh, this is not going to be a quote unquote normal meeting or what I thought. This is actually way less sucky than I thought it was going to be, which I feel like I've gotten that before. This wasn't what I thought, but in a good way.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being way less sucky. I appreciate that.
That's my goal. Suck a little bit less every day. It's not to grow 1%.
Yes. Hey, amen. May we all do that.
Absolutely.
But anyway, our final piece of news for the week is about financial wellness, which anybody who listens or watches our podcast should know that Brandon and I both really appreciate. Addition Wealth has launched its AI-powered B2B financial wellness platform for enterprises. So this can either be white labeled, co-branded, or just distributed by firms. And in this way, Addition Wealth is helping to create financial wellness experiences at scale. Within the platform, firms can also customize their financial wellness experiences based on business objectives, which I thought that last part was particularly interesting because I could imagine, if you're trying to get greater attendance, then, whatever financial wellness might encourage that, you try to plug on. I was curious what you thought about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a perfect use case of blending AI with human touch to have a model that could potentially impact more people. Because from reading through the article, they're not solely focused on AI. Yes, their AI sounds really cool and it's doing a lot of things. Sounds like they've got some cool courses and videos and things like that. But there's also some human beings and financial professionals that can, again, I don't know how it all exactly works, but they can have some human insight in addition. So I think from, we'll call a downstream type of model right now, an employee wellness program like this, or like Element's Money with what Abby and Reese are doing over at Element. Shout out to those two. They're both awesome. Is going to be huge because I think it's tough. Like, because I'm trying to also build this one-to-many type model, this membership that starts as low as $27 a month, but without a lot of volume, that just can't stand alone and be profitable. Whereas for this wellness program, high level, it's at least easier to go and sell, we'll say 10 total employers that even if they each have 10 each, well, boom, there's now 100 people under your umbrella versus trying to find one person at a time at $27 a month or another affordable rate. And because there's so much data that suggests, I heard Abby talk about this on a podcast, that employees often miss work. They're less productive if they're stressed about their finances, which even just anecdotally makes sense. If you're so worried about finances, you're probably not going to be as present in most areas of your life, but work being one of them. So if your employees end up being more productive, they're happier, they also feel cared for because their employer is paying for and offering this type of service, I think it's a huge win across the board and probably step one in this true one-to-many type model before I think the standalone ones will kind of break through.
Nice. Well, sort of sidestepping, but going with your one-to-many, I was curious how you feel like that could, other than this kind of process, be successfully done. Because to your point, I could understand how it's difficult if I literally have to go out and fish every single time to go get somebody. So I'm using my time to do that on top of then advising the people who are paying you $27 a month. So it's not generating the way that it ought to. How do you get that to spin a little faster?
So if I had a perfect answer, I probably already would have done it. But at least what my theory is volume and traffic, at least. And what I mean by that, financial influencer, for example, if they've got several 100,000 followers and they already have that level of trust, probably a bit easier to funnel more people in where you can make different posts about it. You could run different offerings. Although even with that being said, I knew one influencer over 100,000 followers, maybe he's over 150 or even 200 now on social media, tried a similar model to this. Him and I had talked about it a little bit, and even he found it much more challenging than he thought it was going to be. So my theory was going to be, he's delivering great content. He's one of the influencers that I know, like, and trust, and will occasionally have one-to-one conversations, at least through Instagram DMs. And the fact that even he was having issues with it, I thought was interesting, because then that kind of almost debunks the theory that I just shared with you, at least on, this is a sample size of one here. But I think to some degree, like, here, perfect example, if Dave Ramsey were to launch some sort of one-to-many type course, I think he's going to have a good chance of that taking off. And he kind of already does in different ways. I think they even have some wellness programs, but I think it would just require mass amounts of people just because you'd also have to structure it where, because I think 27 a month can be profitable. That's approximately a little over $300 a year. But now, at least based on financial planning standards, you probably don't want to spend much more than 1 hour with that person. Because again, if you're going to fish, like you were saying, and it's fishing, and I could find a client that's going to pay $300 a year, or I could find one who's going to pay 3, 5, 10,000 plus a year, and it takes the same amount of time. From a sheer business perspective, obviously, where's that going to go? To the one that's paying you more, which is why we've seen the industry constantly go quote unquote up market because of that. So I think the lead generation side is the toughest nut to crack first. And then you'd have to make sure that your service matches so that you actually deliver the value and keep people in that system. So that is my long-winded answer to how I think it could work.
First of all, I didn't think that it was long-winded. And second of all, I appreciate it because I would hope that the industry would think about this more, because as somebody who is a benefit of that, of being able to start in Elements and then we've moved on further since then, I wouldn't make the limits, and I do halfway decently for myself. So I would like to think that the industry could focus more on the people like me, the people who are in different situations below me, above me, wherever, because there are a lot of us.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? And I just shared kind of my theories, but if you had to, and I know you probably don't sit up at night thinking, how could a financial planning firm deliver value to underserved markets? But even just hearing what I had said, what would your thoughts be? Like if you were trying to build you're an advisor, you're trying to build a one-to-many model, do it profitably, what comes to mind for you?
The only direct experience that I have that is arguably similar, although not really, I have two different business models. I have the retainer model, and then I have the hourly model. And the hourly is mostly for either A, firms that are starting up and it's more respectful of their cash, or B, don't use me that much. So it just makes sense. Why would I make you pay a retainer when you can pay me hourly? So to that end, I hear you. I feel like when I'm fishing, and I don't even fish, I don't know why I came up with that example. I feel like I bring in whatever I bring in. It so happens that I have more retainer now than I do hourly, but there were times when it was 50-50. So I think whether it's then, like you said, the lead generation could be just finding a whole group of people. So whether then it's showing up to a bunch of different Facebook groups and being like, hey, so-and-so, all people who seem like they could use my services, perhaps that's among the ways. But beyond that, I'm not really sure.
I think that's fair. I think hourly we're seeing some firms pop up that are hourly only. Personally, not how I would want to build my firm. I think it would just be really challenging to get enough billable hours. But I think right now, at least the hourly can be good for, if someone is really simple situation, they just need a little bit of accountability.
Yeah.
They have some level of access, but they don't need the ongoing nature. I think hourly is a way to, right now, at least probably one of the closest ways, or the most long-term business model that we've had at least experience with, that kind of serves this group. But then you're still trying to get people into that. That alone doesn't just solve the lead gen aspect of it, but that would help on the service side. Because I think you could potentially do, an ongoing membership. And I haven't had really anyone take advantage of this aspect, but I did say, hey, if you do want a strategy session, it would be at a discounted rate if you're a member. But that's more on the service side, I think, versus if you have 0 people, which I have more than 0, but it's not tons and tons. But at least for me right now, kind of the way I see it is I'm not aggressively marketing it alone. But now, if nothing else, selfishly, if and when someone comes to me and they're not a traditional financial planning investment management client, I at least give them the option of, hey, here's another option on how we could work together. They'll get access to Elements, they'll get access to monthly office hours, a bit of course content kind of behind the scenes. And now they could still say no, but now I feel really great when I sleep at night, because I will never have to ever again tell someone, unless I change something, but tell someone you don't have enough money to work with me. Now they could say, hey, $27 a month is not worth it to me, and that is fine, but I will not have to say, even if it's in a nice way, you don't have enough to work with me, because I have this option, which, like I said, that makes me feel good.
So not being on your side of the table, does that actually happen? You have to tell somebody like, I'm so sorry, thank you for displaying your whole financial life for me, but you can't afford me.
I only have really like one story of that. And it pretty much was someone who was just out of college, and it was connected to my buddy who was an investment management client, and they just wanted help starting a Roth. So I still gave her advice, but that was before the membership. And it was just basically like, hey, here's the resources. So I didn't say you don't have enough to work with me, but I really couldn't do much more to help other than just give her, it was good advice, but I couldn't really help with the implementation. I did say, hey, if you need help opening that, like I'll jump on a screen share with you. I did do that there, which again, because I felt so bad even not being able to help in another way. So that's the closest that I've been. But especially for larger firms that have minimums of 250, 500 million or more, that's a much more frequent conversation with those folks. And typically they're trying to, when they're good advisors, they're trying to source them to other likely CFPs, independent firms that are going to take care of them. So they still do have a process in place. But for me, I'm just like, I don't even want to have to refer out, because it can almost feel like, even when it's delivered with love and empathy, I'm not good enough to work with that firm.
Yeah.
Is how it could feel. And for me, selfishly, like I said, I don't ever want to be in that position, no matter how large the firm grows, figuring out some way, like, how do I just, if someone genuinely wants help and they genuinely want to take steps, how do I have a resource in place? And I think $27 a month, someone at least can't say you're trying to take advantage of people.
Right. That is true.
Pretty tough at 27 a month.
Yes. I was trying to think, like, in comparison to like a Netflix or I think that's cheaper than Hulu for a month. Yeah.
It's less than $1 a day. And again, with the people that potentially would be coming in here, and right now I even have it set up where they can message me some on-demand stuff. I very rarely get messages too. In fact, I welcome them. Like, yes, you finally asked me a question. Like, let me help. So I feel like it's a good amount of value for the price. It's just tougher to find folks. And even there's just the classic that a lot of business models have talked about. But oftentimes when you're charging a lower price, sometimes that's actually when customers are more demanding and want more, even though they're paying less. So I think you've got that aspect that would be more of a service related problem in the future if you figured out the lead gen side, or people are just like, oh, there's no way I could get value because it is too low. So there's all sorts of things about it. But like I said, the biggest thing is I will not have to tell someone no. They can tell me no. They could ghost me, and that's okay. It's really not okay. I would prefer they not do that, but I will not have to reject someone.
Yes.
Unless they're a jerk. Unless someone's super mean, I would not want to work with someone super mean, but I don't typically talk to super mean people. So it works out.
Well, hopefully, I feel like in life we get in what we give out. So hopefully you wouldn't attract that anyway. So
yeah, at least not on a grand scale. And I think same for you too, right? We're going to deal with enough people where occasionally, sure, someone's going to slip through the cracks. But I think on a consistent basis, it's like, I'm sure same for you. You're working with awesome people. I'm like my clients, I'm working with awesome people. Obviously, you're one of them. But yeah.
Appreciate that. And yes, I can say every single one of my clients, love them.
Yeah. And that's a great feeling.
Place in life.
Yeah. Which is why likely you don't necessarily have any, you're still young, but you don't have those hardcore retirement plans like we were talking about last week too, because even right now in your business, not even close to retirement age. And you're like, I love all my clients.
No.
That's huge.
Sure, I'm not sunsetting anytime soon. But anyway, on that note, thank you for always delving into such depth and letting us get into these windy side paths and whatnot. I appreciate the information, and hopefully the industry will appreciate it too and learn from it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a fun conversation as always, Allie. Looking forward to next week as well.
Thank you. There definitely were more.